Hello there, people of the internet. So I'm out here running some Turkish surplus 8mm Mauser ammunition through this Kar 98. You guys have seen this before on the channel plenty of times. And while I was out here just kind of enjoying myself, I was thinking to myself, you know, I only have two legitimately usable 8mm Mauser rifles. So I was scratching my head and I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and get myself another one. So that's probably what I'm going to do, because this Kar 98 is the only surplus Mauser that I have that takes this Turkish ammunition reliably. I do have other Mauser rifles, but they won't run this Turk stuff. It just fires a little too hot. But this Kar 98 seems to handle that just fine. But I was over here scratching my head thinking to myself, I should get myself another, you know, 1898 pattern Mauser rifle to be able to run this 8mm Mauser stuff through. Well, this Turkish 8mm Mauser stuff through, since it's on the surplus market right now. Thatting, I would really enjoy having another 8mm Mauser rifle. And I was thinking about the experiences that I've had with other Mauser rifles and where I might get around to finding myself one. That said, this other Mauser rifle will definitely be used on the channel, so if you want to help me acquire that item and support my work, then links to Utreon and Patreon are in the description below. That would definitely help me make content. But I was thinking to myself, where can I go to acquire a 8mm Mauser rifle? And one of the things that popped into my head was Royal Tiger Imports. Now, Royal Tiger Imports is kind of famous for being infamous. They sell a lot of really cheap rifles on that website, but these rifles are in very poor condition because of how they were stored. And I wanted to go ahead and make a video talking about my 2 cents on Royal Tiger Imports and the military surplus rifles that they sell. Now, they have a bunch of stuff that has come out of several places, mostly Africa, but several places. And whenever people ask, hey, what's, you know, can I expect from Royal Tiger Imports, I tell them expect something dirty that may or may not have a good bore and may or may not be functional. They do function test them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be functional. Ask me how I know. But I've gotten several rifles from Royal Tiger, and I've noticed a theme whenever it comes to whether or not they're going to be good shooters, meaning whether or not the bore is going to be completely destroyed. So some of the rifles that come out of there is like World War I surplus rifles, or earlier, like incredibly old rifles that have been sitting in storage for a long time and have clearly seen a lot of really hard use. Well, if you get yourself something like that, and it is a rifle that would have been commonly used back in the day, then it's probably going to be something that is not very good. It's probably going to have a bore that has been completely worn out. Back then, ammunition was very corrosive, and who knows how good they were at, you know, actually cleaning their rifles whenever they fired this ammo, and who knows if the rifles were cleaned whenever they were put into storage. That being said, one of the things I got was an Italian Vetterli that has been rechambered for 6.5 Carcano. These rifles were never intended to be used for like frontline military service, and they weren't intended to be fired regularly. They were like a last-ditch rifle, and the people that were using them for XYZ purposes weren't necessarily wanting to use them on the front lines. And the particular Vetterli that I got, although the outside was very disgusting and whatnot, the inside rifling and the inside bore showed signs of it not being used at all. As a matter of fact, this Italian Vetterli I have is actually a very accurate little rifle, because the bore inside of this barrel is actually pretty damn immaculate. Now, granted, the rifle was sleeved, but that was a whole lot of years ago where that happened, and definitely around the same time period as some of these other Carcanos were made that have just completely destroyed barrels, or some of these Enfields that we're finding that have completely destroyed barrels. Rifles like that would have seen much heavier use, much more common use on the battlefield than something like the Italian Vetterli, which was probably something used more for guard duty, or, you know, somebody that was moving supplies or something like that. I mean, who can really say? I know I can't. But the Italian Vetterli in 6.5 Carcano was notorious for not being a very good rifle, especially with actual powered 6.5 Carcano ammunition. They were known to detonate. So that might get whoever is pulling the trigger to not pull the trigger, and as a result, this rifle was not very well used. So, although it was significantly older than some of the other rifles that are being pulled out of the stockpile that Royal Tiger Imports is pulling from, those particular rifles were ones that were in pretty good shape compared to the other ones. Now, if we are talking about something like the 8mm Mauser rifles, they got like M48s and whatnot that I think were sent over there in the 60s or something like that. I'd have to double check where that stockpile came from. But these rifles were sent over there in the 60s, so it missed out on World War I and World War II. I'm sure that they still saw quite a bit of use, but I doubt that they'll be in as bad of shape as some of these other rifles that we're seeing, simply because they're not nearly as old and didn't see near as much use. So whenever it comes to something like that, I imagine that it would be in better shape. And I have talked to several people who have received rifles from around that time period, and these rifles, from what I can tell, are in much better shape and have much better bores, and would be ones that would actually be considered usable and shootable and accurate enough to be able to enjoy out on range. I doubt that they'll be like sub-MOA accuracy. But whenever you think about the time differences between these rifles, like that's what, a 50-60 year difference in terms of manufacture of these rifles, and completely different storage conditions, and completely different, what's the word I'm looking for? Completely different experiences, that's the word I'm looking for, that these rifles have gone through. And as a result, a lot of these 8mm from Royal Tiger appear to be in pretty decent shape. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and bite the bullet and get myself one from Royal Tiger. One, it would make cool content, like I could show you guys, hey, this right here is what they are offering. I'm probably gonna get either an M48 or a 24-47. Those are like common, not all that expensive 98 action Mausers that I'm sure will run this Turkish stuff, no problem. Ow. I gotta remember how powerful this and how smelly it is. How powerful this Turkish stuff is. It's a 154 grain bullet. Oh, that one fired a little low. It's a 154 grain bullet, and my buddy 8mm Mauser man chronographed this stuff. It's traveling just under 3,000 feet per second. That is an incredibly spicy 8mm Mauser round. This Turkish stuff is no joke. However, this Turkish stuff is very common on the market right now. I think I aimed a little too high with that one. Very common on the market right now, and you can find it readily, basically from any surplus center, because it's being surplused onto the U.S. civilian market right now. There we go, that stood it back up. But I got myself, I mean, not a whole lot by, you know, the measures that some people get, but I got myself a couple of rounds of this Turkish stuff, and I'd like to have more than rifle to shove it through. And my Turkish Mauser just does not like the Turkish ammo, simply because it burns hotter than normal 8mm Mauser does. But I still wanted to come out and talk about my thoughts on Royal Tiger. And whenever you think about where these things came from and you just apply some thought process as to whether or not what you're getting will or will not be worn out, once you take certain things into consideration, then you'll start to really realize, you know, hey, maybe stuff from World War I is going to be in worse shape than stuff from the 60s, or maybe you get yourself like some of the antiques, no FFL required, but you get yourself something that is like the Austrian straight pull rifles. Those right there would have seen a lot of use in an area like that where ammunition for that was very common, whereas something like a Gras rifle, which is also being surplused by Royal Tiger Imports, probably wouldn't have seen as much use due to ammunition availability and whatnot. And just with that being a single shot rifle versus the straight pull being, you know, magazine fed, they probably would have used the straight pull more than the Gras, and that's probably one of the reasons why the Gras that we're pulling out of that stockpile are in slightly better shape than a lot of the straight pull rifles that we're pulling out of that stockpile. Anyway, folks, I'm rambling on at this point. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Royal Tiger is very hit or miss. I'm sure you already know that. And I'm sure that you want me to come on here and say dirt cheap surplus, excellent condition, you know, shooter grade, take it out to the range, not a lot of money, go get yourself some. But I just can't. It really is hit or miss. You might get a wall hanger, or you might get yourself something that can hit at 100 yards like my Italian Vetterli that I had picked up in 6.5 Carcana with proper loaded ammunition. I make regular hits out at 100 yards with that because the bore is decent. So we're going to see how the 8mm Mauser rifles are from Royal Tiger Imports, but that will be down the road, and if you want to help me make that happen, then Utreon and Patreon, that's the best way to do it. That said, thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below, link to all sorts of stuff. Go check that out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day, and I will see you guys on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.